Humanity has had its share of deadly viruses throughout history, but nothing like the two we will be comparing today. If either virus were to actually be created, humanity's fate might be sealed. I'm referring to the Harran virus from Dying Light and the Freaker virus from Days Gone. Both viruses are absolute nightmare fuel in a real-world scenario, but today I asked the question, which virus is deadlier? Hi everyone, I'm Drunken Drogger, and let's get right into the video. So I've written out my own criteria to possibly answer this question, but at the end of the day, this is just one YouTuber's opinion. Stay to the end and let me know what you think. First, we need to learn about each virus individually. Then I'll rate each one by their rate of infection, symptoms, lethality, mutations, strengths, and weaknesses. At the end, I'll give a severity score from 1 to 10 for each category. Honestly, this is just my take on both games. This isn't meant to be a hardcore breakdown. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at Dying Light, where the Harran virus has decimated the city. So what are the origins of this virus? Well, my curious viewer, the exact origins are unknown. We know that it was man-made. It is highly likely that the military and the global relief effort developed this virus, based on the information we get from the in-game and the DLC from the following. Unchecked power and corporate profit always really spell disaster for humanity in some way. We will dive more on this subject later, but for now, let's move on. So what are some of the symptoms of the Harran virus and how does it spread? The virus that was developed is highly aggressive and spreads only through physical contact. It is a much more vicious variation of rabies, essentially hijacking the brain of the infected person, sending them on a rampage to attack any healthy host. This virus is only transmitted through bodily fluids, and once in the bloodstream, it will travel to the host's nervous system. The immune system can't properly fight something it can't see. The virus causes brain swelling, seizures, fever, erratic behavior, hallucinations, paranoia, increased levels of adrenaline, and blurry vision. If left untreated without the antisin suppressant, more on that later, will sometimes cause the infected individual to hallucinate, believing that others are actually infected trying to attack them. Jesus, I feel like I just read all the symptoms of some new drug commercial. Side effects may include Anyway, symptoms will begin to get far worse in later infected stages, such as blisters, blood clots, red eyes, and sometimes large tumor-like growths. They will also begin losing hair, become malnourished, extremely pale, and have purple blotches. So Dr. Camden makes note of this in his lab and also states that the irises have changed colors from his perspective to a ghostly white. At least that's what the lab notes suggest, that the mutation has given the infected some sort of infrared vision, helping them see in the dark. If that's the case, it does make sense. It's no wonder UV light causes them to react painfully. Which leads me to my next question. Does the virus have any major weaknesses? The virus is light intolerant and cannot survive outside of the host. Although once in the person's body, the virus spreads far too rapidly for the UV light to destroy it. Yet it still can be used against the infected as a way of repelling them, or weakening them enough to kill them. Oh yeah, and water. They drown really easily in water, which is one of the many reasons I don't refer to them as zombies, because technically they're not really undead, just infected. But first, let's go back to the virus's possible origins and the GRE's involvement. It's the same old story with companies trying to sell dangerous information to any military or terrorist group for lots of cash. Big surprise, the virus got out of control, and the company, in this case the GRE, the Global Relief Effort, tries to cover up their tracks of literally any involvement. So they send in Agent Kyle Crane, which is the main character, to retrieve the sensitive information, but before his arrival, so many in Harran tried using original flu medicine, but to no avail. International specialists were invited during this epidemic to help contain and identify the origins of the virus. So the GRE moved in quickly with relief efforts, with experimental medications at the newly established hospital at Harran Stadium. It was placed under quarantine soon after due to the violent nature of the virus. The final tests were done in Old Town. The GRE and the Ministry of Defense were financially compensating anyone who would volunteer for clinical trials. I believe that everything that the GRE did on the world stage was just to look like the hero, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, with their influence, they were going to help nuke the city to destroy all evidence. Kyle, however, luckily turned on the transmitter just in time and stopped the bombing, just to let people know that they were still alive in the city. So they are very ruthless, but they also help create Antizin. And when Antizin proved highly effective as a suppressant, the GRE started to airdrop it around Harran. Before the Antizin, people had to resort to chopping off infected limbs so as to not completely become infected. The virus is constantly mutating and turns most of the infected into highly effective killing machines to further the spread of the disease. So I would say this is definitely the virus's strengths, just what kind of crazy creations it makes as far as altering the human condition. So how did this virus mutate, and what were the deadliest mutations? Boy, oh boy, did this virus mutate in many crazy ways, distorting the human body into grotesque monstrosities. The true lethality of this virus is clear. The infected mutate to infect every last healthy host. Newly infected individuals will turn into virals. They are highly sensitive to loud noises such as explosions, and they can be heard screaming, breaking out of buildings to investigate where any noise comes from. Virals are clearly at war in their heads though, as if a part of their humanity is trying to fight for control. Sometimes you might hear them talk occasionally, speaking only a few words like no. Yet the virus compels them to fight to the death. They are quick, they can run after you, they'll dodge your attacks and climb buildings to pursue you until they catch you. They often run in packs and will just beat down their prey. In rare cases though, they will bite. The streets are overrun with infected. Traveling on the ground is ill-advised. So yeah, staying on building tops is really the only way to stay away from the common infected, which we're going to talk about right now. So biters are the most common infected and move very slowly during the day. They aren't much of a threat one-on-one, and really they're not much of a threat in numbers. At night they're more aggressive, and in some instances biters will actually turn into night walkers, becoming almost like a viral. They're highly aggressive and they'll run after you. I could go on about all the special infected though, but the video would be like an hour long and it's really not supposed to be like this. So what is the deadliest infection that this virus has to throw at humanity? And in my opinion, that would be the volatile and the alpha volatile variant. These creatures have mutated to take out the strongest of humanity. They're taller, they're faster, they have denser muscle fibers than the average man, and they have just been genetically altered to take you out. Luckily, they only come out at night and they're apex predators, man. They can jump high, they'll climb just about anything just to be able to get to you, and they will catch you, especially if you're slow. Although they can be rather clumsy. That's insane. He just died? Small munitions do very little against them, and melee combat is assuredly a death sentence, so just run. Cardio, number one rule in Zombieland, man. You might survive if you find a UV lit area and shotgun the hell out of them. That's really the only chance that you have of killing them. In a real world scenario anyway. There are other ways to kill them in game, obviously, but it's like playing Russian roulette. So nighttime would be devastating. I'm sure the military would be able to deal with the slow shambling infected, but the volatiles and numbers would probably overwhelm them. So setting up UV bases would be the only way to save people. Now fortunately, you can camouflage yourself against them. However, the alpha volatiles, they see right through the disguise. Honestly, if the military was able to identify the weaknesses of the special infected, had time to properly coordinate, humanity probably would have a chance. The infection rate seems slow in some instances, and that is a blessing for humanity. Plus, a suppressant was also developed to slow the spread. So this really does give everyone a small fighting chance. So, however, we do see that the mutation has evolved in Dying Light 2, and humanity is almost wiped out. So in conclusion, this would be terrifying, obviously, for obvious reasons in a real world scenario, and it would be almost certain death for humanity. Yet, like I said, we might have a small chance of survival. Now with the freaker virus, also known as the hooligan virus, would that be a world ender? Let's dive into that real quick. So how did the freaker virus originate? Well, the very same way that a lot of them do, and it's just another greedy company looking to profit off of humanity's misery and just make a quick buck. So what could possibly go wrong? Well, my dear friends, so the company Cloverdale was a large bioengineering corporation working on a bioweapons program in secret. So it was disguised as this biobotany project. An intern, whose name is David Gorman, with Cloverdale started to become a little suspicious of the company and looked to acquire evidence of their corruption. So he's a whistleblower. He then tries to convince Sarah Whitaker, the main character's wife, who just so happened to work for Cloverdale, that they were up to something dangerous. But needless to say, she thought he was being paranoid and just kind of completely ignored his ranting.
David Gorman, he was this research intern. You know what I said? I told him that we're a farm and we're high tech and all that shit, and that there are billions of dollars at stake, and to just leave it alone. And he didn't listen. He hacked the system, he got behind the firewall, he told me that this was some sort of classified project or something. I don't know.
Classified project. Just slow down and...
He wanted to be the next Edward Snowden.
Even though she does play a major role in the virus's creation, being a botanist, Sarah was able to get a job at this facility. Although the game never really elaborates on which flower causes the freaker virus, it does originate from a flower. So David is trying to gather evidence, and he breaks into the restricted part of the lab and unknowingly gets infected upon breaking in, and he grabs a sample of Cloverdale's deadly secret. This whistleblower was going to expose them at an environmental convention in Portland, and he was meeting with, a reporter to help bring down this big mega corporation. But he unknowingly is spreading this virus to literally everyone at the convention, and it was the perfect storm. I mean, these people left the convention through mass transit, airports, railways, you name it. Like, it is just going nuts with the spread. So within 2 weeks, this virus mutated and began slaughtering everyone. Like, citizens were overrun, governments collapsed, and a third, keep in mind, and I'm going to bring this up throughout the video, but a third of the world's population had died in the span of 2 weeks. So as far as lethality is concerned, this virus is probably one of the deadliest. That is a very small time frame. So how did this virus mutate, and what were some of the deadliest mutations? So the freaker virus was in development and still was able to cause genetic chaos. So O'Brien states that the virus had a near 100% infection rate amongst humans, and most of the young and old would have just died due to the rapid genetic mutation. Their bodies couldn't handle it. Although we do see, some variants of freakers that are children who did survive. So this virus isn't like cancer that causes cellular degradation, but rather it hacks the body at a cellular level, causing muscle growth. It's reshaping the host into an effective killer. It spreads through the lymph system of an infected host and then controls the cells. So Lieutenant Booth states that it's clear the virus wants them that way. So that's kind of crazy. Just like the Harran virus, this seems to be very similar to rabies, but it makes the freakers hostile to any non-infected creature, right? Because it's trying to spread. Which leads me to my next point. This virus doesn't just affect people though. It also affects animals, causing them to change as well. So you have wolves, birds, bears, oh my. And I guess, monkeys possibly. Like, it's almost like everything can be infected, which is terrifying. So wolves now are deadlier, capable of running at 60 miles an hour. Bears were already extremely dangerous, but now they're more resilient to damage and are much stronger. So that's great. And the birds are just aggressive as hell and will attack you just because you're not infected. So this, in my opinion, is just another extreme as far as the lethality of this virus. So while we're at it, let's just talk about types of infected that this virus has created. So we'll talk about the most common type, which would be the swarmers, and they often travel in hordes. And while they aren't damaged severely by light, they are more active at night. So light's not really a major factor like the Harran virus is. is. So hordes of freakers that are fast and animalistic are going to shoot down many people's odds of survival just due to their strength in numbers. In small numbers, they aren't as deadly, but are still a threat. They'll chase you, okay? The regular infected with dying light, they kind of shamble towards you quickly, but they're not running after you know what I mean? And again, I won't go over all types of mutations, just the most common and most lethal. So breakers are relentless and are far stronger than the common, like, basic freaker. This is due to the steroids being present in the bloodstream. The virus being almost sentient is like, oh look, a piece of candy. But I think our top level killer when it comes to the mutation, and again, this is my opinion, is the Reacher. They are rare, but one-on-one in the game, they're not too bad, but in a real life situation, they would probably, like, rip you in half. They're extremely fast and they're resilient to a lot of damage. So I would call them, honestly, to me they look like Yetis. So I don't know. Like, I think Reacher's kind of like a meh. I don't really like that name for them. It's like an encounter with Bigfoot or something. The lethality of this virus is just how fast it spreads and how rapidly it mutates. So stragglers of the human race would survive for a time, in my opinion. It would almost be hopeless to try and fight the hordes unless they starved out. Then humanity might rise from the ashes. To summarize this virus, I'd say humanity wouldn't stand a chance unless Mother Nature, seeing this anomaly in the wild, starts to genetically alter humans to combat it, almost like maintaining a balance of power. I don't know. Sounds like a good plot for Days Gone 2, and you know, maybe. Let's see. But yeah, like this video if you'd love to see Days Gone 2. Days Gone is a great game, and we need a second one. So now, for the reason you all clicked on the video, which virus is deadlier? So we will start with the rate of infection, and I gave a 6 out of 10 to the Harran virus because it was isolated and it didn't spread globally within weeks, not to mention a suppressant had been developed to slow it down, and the Freaker virus after 2 weeks killed a third of the entire population. So as far as the rate of infection goes, like I said, I gave a 6 out of 10 to the Harran virus and I gave a 9 to the Freaker virus. A 10 would be like everyone died in the first week. There were no survivors. So that's kind of how I drew my conclusion there. And as far as symptoms, they actually tied. I gave them both an 8 out of 10. So symptoms for both viruses are insane. I mean, the damage they cause throughout the body, within and the outside, even with the hair loss, skin discoloration, and all the aforementioned symptoms, both victims, like, they lose their ability to think rationally. They lose their identity as a human being. Both cases also show that the virus can mutate in such a way to give the host sentience again. So you know, we see an example of that with O'Brien and the secret ending of Days Gone, and the following DLC ending in Dying Light. So as far as mutations are concerned, I gave the Harran virus an 8 out of 10, and I gave the Freaker virus a 9 out of 10. And this one was actually really close, but what tipped the scale in the Freaker virus's favor for me was its ability to infect non-human hosts. And we don't really see that with Dying Light. Animals weren't really affected by this virus. So all sorts of animals are at risk with the Freaker virus, and they just created a more effective killing machine when it came to the common infected. Whereas the Harran virus, the common infected are just, like I said, they're very slow. So on the other hand though, volatiles are more numerous than any of the more lethal infected in Days Gone. So this was just a really hard decision to make, and also this whole video, for that matter, it was actually kind of hard to make, but this was just for fun, you know. This was just a thought I was just putting out into the ether, so to speak. So let's go to the lethality. But I gave an 8 out of 10 to the Harran virus and a 9 out of 10 for the Freaker virus. I gave the Freaker virus the win in this instance because of just how many died on a global scale. The Harran virus, like I said, was just isolated to Harran. It didn't, you know, it wasn't global in a matter of weeks. So even in the events of Dying Light 2 on their website, they state that in 2023, after years of pandemic, humanity was on the verge of extinction. However, keep in mind that this isn't really the exact same virus as the Harran virus. It's a little different. But in conclusion, obviously both viruses are certainly terrible and both games are fantastic. They're definitely in my all-time favorites, top 5. I freaking love them. I'm actually, like, yeah, I'm a huge fan of Dying Light, but to me the winner was clear. And if you think I'm wrong, that's totally fine. This video, again, this topic was just fun. It's just a fun little video that I wanted to make, and you can have whatever opinion you want. It's totally cool. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like and be sure to subscribe, and cheers. I'll see you guys in the next one.